One thing that's really been annoying me on Sorare recently is this criticism or complaining about the division system, because I really don't think people understand how good this is for the game. Now, I know it's not perfect, and although I might have said it is perfect, I do think it's perfect for Sorare, so let's discuss it. Firstly, let's just be blunt. Everyone is pretty much biased to their own circumstances in some way, whether it's known bias or unconscionable bias. But regardless of that, I like to think over the course of this channel, anyone that's watched me has seen I can of course be biased towards my own, but ultimately I try and take an overall rounded take and decide if it's best for the game, best for the players. So some combination of that we'll be looking at today, but the first thing I want to talk about is sort of the echo chamber that is Twitter. Because a lot of people complain about things on Twitter, and I highly recommend you doing that if you are annoyed by something. You know, Sorare members and Sorare employees can feedback to that. But ultimately, it gets to the point where it's just continued noise about something you don't like. But I think people continue it because they think everyone thinks like them. But that is the problem with the Twitter echo chamber, because there's no benefit to me or anyone else going on Twitter and arguing the other side of the point, because all you end up doing is arguing about, you know, completely unrelated topics, and you're getting nowhere. You might fall out with someone that you used to respect or something like that. And it's like, I've done that for years and years previously, but now I'm at the stage where I realise it has absolutely no benefit. And I think, you know, most people are in a similar vein now, where it's like, yeah, I'm just going to let you have your opinion, you crack on with it. And that just means it's sort of a one-sided debate. But then it's getting fueled by this sort of like no counter arguments because people don't want to get involved. I know we're talking about Sorare here, but you see it all the time on like the political spectrum, and everyone's like, yeah, you know, all of this, but there's no point in arguing in Twitter. And of course now, this is my channel, these are my views, there's no one here to speak for the other side of the argument, so therefore this isn't the perfect argument. But I do just want to get my thoughts out there. And let's start with, you know, the key reasons on why some people don't like the division system and potentially hate the division system. For me, it comes down to kind of two reasons. The first one, unfair sort of division demotion, or, you know, what people know as a DNP, ruining the game week, but it goes one step further and possibly demotes you. We've seen some horrible circumstances of this, like Benfica had their game cancelled, and that sounds like a perfect place to start for me, because yes, there are circumstances where things go against you. You do get people pulling out with injuries in warm-ups or injuries just before the teams are lined up. So all these different circumstances where you can go and get demoted for something that really wasn't your fault. But a lot of this really isn't your fault. You know, you don't have any impact on the games in front of you, and you can get demoted for it. You know, an unfair red card, or a red card that, or two yellows that couldn't be reviewed by VAR. So many different circumstances in football that have that. Now, I'm not saying shit happens, let's move on, it's a good system. I'm saying, yes, there are unknown DMPs, and yes, it is slightly unfair, like I mentioned, the Benfica or any sort of game cancellation. No doubt it's unfair, it's not a perfect system, but a lot of the criticism for unknown DMPs aren't really what you consider unknown DMPs. They're what I would call surprise benchings. You know, there's a lot of times where in this game, people are complaining that they didn't get the right lineup, and that's an unknown DMP. When realistically, that's part of football. You know, when you get a team like PSG rotating Donnarumma last night, who's, yes, obviously a goalkeeper, doesn't need rotation, but their league's so weak, they need to balance out playing different players. You know, these are human beings on the pitch. So what I'm trying to point out here is that, firstly, it's unfair that, yeah, sometimes shit goes against you. You get unfair DMPs, you get demoted. You get unfair red cards, you get demoted as well. But people criticising the unfair DMPs, sometimes it's actually their knowledge of the game. And I'll go one step further than that and say, yes, there's unfair DMPs, but that doesn't mean you're demoted. It's not DNP and demoted. It's your total score that demotes you. So again, you go to the worst case scenario and you have a Benfica stack and all of their players are out, so yes, you're going to get demoted. But the majority of time, that doesn't happen. What actually happens, if you have a lineup of 5 players, one of them might pull up injured, like I have Lukeba yesterday, some reason got injured before the start of the Leipzig game, he's not playing, and my team's not getting demoted. Just referencing my own teams because it's simply easier. RB Leipzig, Lukeba, 90% chance of starting, great, unknown DMP, he's out. But still, the team's scoring relatively well. I've still got a player to play, so it's unknown what happens. I could ultimately end up getting demoted. But what I'm saying here is that the majority of time, you're going to have no impact on these DMPs. It's not going to affect your teams. Throughout the season, there are times where you're going to get an unknown DMP, and then you could be demoted. But that would be based mainly on the rest of your team's performance. In most divisions, I think it's only the bottom 25% that actually get relegated. So, in order to be in that position, you were never going to score well anyway. Yes, I'm not saying it's not bad luck, but it's not a reason we need to completely get rid of this division system. I can go on to the positives later, and I certainly will do. But right now, it's, something that happens to every manager. It's unknown, it's random. Yes, you have those cases where a game's called off, and maybe we could do something with that. But when you think about a game being called off, it's very complicated to just say, right, anyone with a player that had that game called off, we're just going to scrap, especially when you get to like December. And it's like, what happens if someone had a winning team, a game gets scrapped, and then he loses? That's far worse than you getting demoted for 1 week and then having the chance to earn it back. To conclude then, yes, Sorare has unknown DMPs, and arguably by adding divisions, the effects could get worse in certain game weeks. But the majority of game weeks will have no dramatic effect on your team if it performs reasonably well. Yes, you'll still lose out on higher up, prizes, as it was before the division system. And I'm not going to touch on, subs or if we should have DMPs in the game, because that's not actually for this video. This video is divisions. And what I'm saying is that the division system actually benefits from this more, because now you're having strategic choices on your divisions, on your potentially unknown DMP players. Perfect example, Saka in this game week. Now, he had a really good fixture to Bournemouth. Well, could have been a really good fixture, they got beat. But ultimately, should he be in that Division 1 team? Arteta said something along the lines of he should be ready, or, we're going to see if he's ready. That, for me, would be the perfect time to say, right, I know Arteta enough. I'm going to use my own knowledge. Every time he says a player's fit and, they're a doubt, they always don't make it. And vice versa. I think it was the next week when he said he's likely to not play. He's likely to not play, and he did play. That comes down to ball knowledge or strategy. So, yes, unknown DMPs can be unfortunate. But the benefit of them are that you again use your strategy to place yourself in a better position. You put your unknown DMPs in strategic places so that if they do impact you, they don't impact you as much. And I don't really, buy into this, oh, this is awful, I've got demoted because of the DMP. It happens to everyone. Yes, it will happen to everyone. Eventually they get DMP'd and that causes them to go down. But again, majority of time, it's not going to have an effect. The next part that really seems to rattle Sorare players is the fact that you can be in Division 2, get a higher score than the person in Division 1, and get a worse prize. And for me, this comes down to how you want to play the game or your thoughts on the game. But for me, you're not in that Division 1 in that case. Well, let me start with my preferred point on this. You are completely biased to that scenario because it's so obvious to check when that works for you, i.e., I would have earned more money, but no one goes and checks Division 2, Division 3, Division 4 to see if I had added all these players together, would I come worse off in a mediocre week? And of course, it's balanced. That will happen. This will also happen. But my key point to sort of dismiss all of that is that the division system rewards those that are better Sorare players. If you're consistently better, you will be consistently in higher divisions. So let's say you get an unknown DMP and your first team drops to Division 2. Well, the best players will have all of their teams in Division 1 anyway. That's how, in theory, it would work. So yes, you've been unfortunately DNP'd out of one of your teams, but the effects are so minimal where it's a minimal effect to start with, as I just discussed. But in theory, the effects are even more minimalised because the better players who you want to be rewarding on a fantasy football game are rewarded with more teams in it. So, again, it's a bit of, how it was to how it is. There's been enough months now where every Sorare player should understand there's been a transition. There's been a big transition to Sorare 2.0 with in-season cards, with divisions, and some other changes that don't come to mind right now. But ultimately, you need to be striving to climb those leaderboards. It's not a 1 week system. So now, we're looking at the different sides of it. Was before better or is now better? And I have a clear argument that now is a better fantasy football strategic product where you need to place your players in the correct divisions. If I go live to this week, it's a perfect example of where you could argue I've got it completely wrong. Division 1, 216 points. Division 4, 300 points. So in this scenario, I should have swapped some of these players around to get, better returns. That is on me. Yes, there's luck elements like Arsenal not beating Newcastle, but those luck elements feed into your risk or reward. I didn't want to risk, my good team having Nick Pope in goal. I easily could have. I've gone for Vicario, who's got similar enough difficult game. But because I had Saka, because I had Rice, I'm wanting them to perform. I want to cheer them on doing well. So what I'm ultimately trying to say from the division system is that it rewards consistently good players. Now, if you've been watching my Sorare journey, you would have seen that I came 4th in one of the early Bundesliga competitions, and I got a tier 2 or something not that good, whereas I would have won Division 1, or at least got a much better reward, 1st or 2nd. But that is completely irrelevant, because for those weeks before where I had a chance to get promoted, I didn't. That was on me. That is my strategy not being good enough to push up the divisions. And so frequently, I see players that have stacking one team complaining that they had a good week and they're not in the highest division. That is your strategy. The benefit of stacking is that all of your cards will, in theory, have high correlation. So they'll perform well together, they'll perform badly together. That doesn't benefit a division system. That is your strategy. You need, in a division system, to be consistently playing well. And for me, that works better as a strategic point from a player, and it works better from a Sorare company perspective, because you need players to have a broad depth of gallery, not just buy one club and sit on it. And I get to the point 6 months ago where I had all my Sorare cards, it was a decent amount of money, but I just lost care for them because all I did was play my Leipzig stack and my Brighton stack and wait for them to dick someone 3-0 or 4-0. And there was absolutely no strategy. So when, say, Heidenheim went and won 4-0 against, let's say Heidenheim went and beat Bayern Munich and all the stacks, did really well because all the Bayern stacks where there's more cards didn't do well. That wasn't a strategic choice because all they were doing was playing the Heidenheim stacks every single week like every stacked player was. On top of that, they had a 5% bonus on, the collection and fighting everyone else. So my point is that for the long-term sustainability, or for the long-term, more importantly, enjoyment of Sorare, the old system is not better than the division system. The division system rewards depth, it rewards knowledge, and just rewards better fantasy football players. I think too many people are still caught up in how the old game was. But the old game was dying, and I wouldn't even call it a slower death. By the time we had seen 2 cycles of negativity where card prices were drastically falling from the start to the end of the season, for me, that just, I know people want it to stay that way because they've got all their classic cards and they did get devalued in this new system. But the current Sorare 2.0, if it had started, would have been a much better product, much more sustainable. And it does rattle me that people are still complaining, particularly about the division system. Now, again, I'm not saying it's perfect, but I'm really happy with how Sorare are implementing changes to it. They made little minor adjustments, so now Division 1 is strategically, or definitely the best place to play, at least in my opinion. If you've got numbers to say different, perfect. Go exploit Division 2, 3, 4, wherever you think, the best alpha is. So I love the way that Sorare take an analytical approach and say, do you know what, people were dropping down, or we're not rewarding, a bigger bunch of users in different scenarios. And then I see people saying like, oh, well, Division 1 needs more players in it. And I'm like, well, that doesn't really make sense, because if there's more players in it, then you need to give more rewards. And if you don't have more, if you just give all your rewards to Division 1, then worse value cards just get absolutely battered and just completely worthless. So I'm looking at, like, say, the leaderboards for this week, and you'll see some cheaper stacks, a Bournemouth stack, a Newcastle stack, a Southampton stack. Without the division system, I think for a new user trying to get involved, it's so much harder. But at least in this scenario, when the best players are trying to climb to the top of the divisions and the worst players obviously start where they are, yeah, I just think that's better for new users as well. So for current users, it's better so they can exploit their strategies, knowing their managers, if they're telling the truth or not. You know, Pep Guardiola this week saying Rico Lewis cannot be dropped, and he got dropped. Anyone that knows football, that didn't surprise them at all. Then you have for new players, it's better for them as they get to, you know, start in a softer division rather than having to compete with Man City, Arsenal, Liverpool stacks every week, because most of them play in the top division. Let me drag some numbers into that quickly. So looking at arguably the most prestigious division, the Premier League in-season Division 1, doesn't matter what scarcity you pick, you're going to be playing all your top players. 6% are playing Palmer, 6% are playing Foden, 7.5% are playing Salah. If you drop down into Division 4 and you're a new player, your highest probabilities, Aaron Ramsdale against Everton. You know, it's so much better for a new user to come and face these sort of divisions or these sort of players rather than just getting battered by Cole Palmer, who costs £1,000. Look, moving up to Division 3, similar thing. No real standout cards that are gonna, you know, absolutely smash you. The top players are not that good. As time goes on, you know, I'm not saying there's not cases where Man City stacks aren't in Division 4, but in time they will get promoted. And yeah, I just don't see how you can say this division system isn't working. Maddison, most selected in Division 2, not playing. Again, very small selection of your top players, your Palmers, your Sakas. Because if you're a player that has those cards, you need to be putting them in Division 1 to get the maximum extractable value, which I think everyone's going to try and do. Again, another point in the division system is that you'll notice the percentages are a lot higher. A lot of people using similar cards. So another strategy could be that fact of a differential, where we're getting to the point where, you know, who did I play this week? I played Salah, Saka. Anyway, it's kind of besides the point. My whole point is, when people do that and they start thinking in the same ways, there will be a time where it benefits a strategy to say, do you know what? If everyone's playing Salah, I'm going to drop him to Division 2 and play Evan Nielsen from Bournemouth. And it will work sometimes. So, again, I just don't really see the negativity around divisions. Now, I don't play Unique or Super Rare, so I'm not going to particularly comment on those divisions, but in Limited and Rare, which I do play, I think they are fantastic benefit to the game. I think Sorare 2.0 has been a good step, a risky step that has ultimately started very well. It's too soon to say if Sorare 2.0 can last multiple seasons. You would need a fortune teller for that, but we do know the classic season version wasn't working. So a lot of the negativity I don't believe in. I think unknown DMPs do have an effect. They're not as impactful as people expect. I think if you score a higher position than someone else if you score more points than someone in the division above you and you get less reward, that is, you know, down to your own strategy for not getting to Division 1. We're like, what is it, 23 game weeks into Sorare 2.0. You've had plenty of time to get there. Yes, luck can go against you. Luck goes against you and for you in every single way on Sorare. And ultimately, it's very biased, because if you had a good game week, you will check. But never will people check every single division to see if they were compiled into one, how it would work. Those are my thoughts. I hope you agree to some degree. If you don't, you know, maybe leave a comment so it's a bit more of a balanced argument. But regardless, I know some of you like these sort of rant videos. I've tried to dim them down. I don't do too many now. But if you did, drop a like. Maybe I'll do some more, because there's some stuff I could say. All the best. Cheers.